This is that escutcheon for that old GRUNOW TELEDIal that I worked on for a gentleman. And when he was picking up the radio, he dropped the escutcheon on the ground. Actually, when he was bringing the parts to me to reassemble the cabinet, he dropped the escutcheon on the ground and cracked the glass. So I was able to get a glass that was intended for a Zenith from Mark at dialcovers.com. And here we go. So this should fit on there just fine. I'm going to give that a try shortly. But anyway, I'm trying to remove the original glass so that I can get this taken care of. So what I've done is I took an X-Acto knife. This is, see what this is held in with is cork. It's like a cork gasket, and it's all dried out, and you know it was probably glued in the first place. So it's really tough to get that out of there, and if you're not careful, it wants to just crumble. But I don't want that because I might be able to reuse it. You never know. If I can reuse it, that would be great because then I wouldn't be sticking something else in there that didn't belong. But to get this glass out, I have to get this cork gasket out because it's what it is this thing is flanged on this side here, and the glass sets in from behind. It sets in from behind down this way, and then this cork gasket was glued in around it to hold it in place. Now this glass, I know that's the way it's set up because this glass is able to move alongside that cork gasket now that I've loosened it. So I've gone around it with an X-Acto knife, you know, first the bottom, then the top, then the bottom, all the way around until I tore up my X-Acto knife blade, but it's a cheap Harbor Freight one, so who cares. But I loosened that gasket. So now what I'm going to try and do is slip that gasket out of there in such a way that I can reuse it. So I'll keep at it because there are going to be sticky spots, but you can kind of see where that glass is down in there. Okay, there will be sticky spots. I want to make sure I try and get this out in as few pieces as possible because I might be able to glue it back in. So I'll restart the video once I've got that gasket out. Okay, that was the best I could do. I was able to get it loose in several pieces. So I should be able to work with those pieces if I'm really careful with them as I handle them, and then I'll lift the glass out. Well, there was no way to get it out of there without breaking it. It was just too big. So I'm not sure how I'll get the other one in, but this one wasn't doing them any good anyway. It was so broken and it looked awful. So now I have to figure out how to get the other one in, and it's actually a little bit large, so I might have to get a different one made. But we'll see, and I'll give this a shot. So I'll get rid of this glass. Well, I had a hell of a time putting this dial glass in, if you don't mind me saying so. You see, the dial glass is sized just so that it just fits inside this channel that's here, that this dial is made from. The trouble is that once this thing was assembled, it seems, you cannot get that dial glass out, and you cannot put a new one in. So it must be that this escutcheon was sold as an assembly with the dial glass in it, and it was basically pressed. The escutcheon was pressed around the dial glass once it was set in place. Because it is slightly bigger, the glass itself is slightly bigger than the opening that is allowed by the flange that you see there. And it's pretty tight. So this here is this side of the flange right there. And the dial glass actually projects to about here, if you can see the screwdriver. Let's look at the back side of it. It's more visible here. So you can see the flange. you can see this flange here, and the dial glass goes back into the flange. So the trouble is, the dial glass itself needed to be about 6 3/16, maybe 6 1/8. But the opening provided by the flange is 6 inches on the nose. So getting the dial glass out, I had to break it. There was no other way to get it out but to break it. And I had to take the new plastic dial glass, and I had it cut for me by dialcovers.com, and he made it for me at 6 1/4. That's what I specified, and he made it precisely 6 1/4. But I couldn't get 6 1/4 into this flange. So I spent literally 2 or 3 hours last night working that dial glass slowly, little by little, making it small enough, taking a little material off at a time, making it small enough so that I could, like a soft contact lens, I could bend the thing and get it into the flange. And I could work it all the way around until I got to the last inch or two, and it just was too hard to get in. I finally took off enough material and I heated the dial glass or the dial plastic with hot water to make it a little bit softer and less likely to crack. And I got it warm, and I worked quickly while it was still wet. I set it in there and I worked it, and all of a sudden, when I was just about to give up, that last inch just boom, popped in there, bang. Now once it's in there, it's loose and it's moving around quite a bit because there's a lot more space once you get beyond this flange. So what I did, that cork gasket, because it was so loose, this cork gasket was just too small, too narrow. So I couldn't use it, even though I managed to save most of the cork gasket in large enough pieces to work with. I couldn't get it to work. I tried super gluing it in, and aside from the fact that the super glue didn't hold it worth a darn, it was too loose anyway. And then I got this idea. I buy this dial belt material at Radio Days. And you can see that it has a square cross section. If I can get my camera to focus. It has a square cross section. There we go. And that happened to be just the right size to fit in here as a nice gasket. I had to push it just a little bit. It had to be pushed in with a little bit of super glue about every 4 inches or so. That's holding it in. And that gasket did a really nice job of holding that glass in there tight. So I had to try something different, and it works. You don't see cork in there now like you did before, but it looks perfectly natural, that rubber gasket. Now I had to handle this dial glass an awful lot, and inevitably you're going to scratch it when you're doing all that. So I put some very fine scratches in it, mostly from the handling it, holding it like this as I turned it. Well, the way to remove that, I did keep rinsing it with warm water, so I didn't have a lot of material building up on it. But the way to deal with that is to polish it, and I use Novus. Now, I purchased a kit. I don't know if I got it from Amazon or Radio Days, I'm not sure. But I bought all 3 levels of this Novus plastic polish material. This is the best there is, guys. And what I wound up using on this one was the number 2 first, to use that for the fine scratch remover. That took care of the scratches that were on the dial glass. Okay, and then you polish it up, the last step, with this plastic clean and shine, which doesn't do a lot except removes residue from the scratch remover and basically clarifies the glass, makes it look real good. Between those two, I made this dial cover look pretty good. And although it still has real fine, you can see they're real fine from polishing, that's actually good because that gives it a vintagey look that it wouldn't otherwise have. And it makes this look like it's been around for a while, even though it's brand new. So I kind of like the surface that this left me with. And I think this guy's going to be real happy with it. And the cool thing about it is this is plastic. It can be bumped, it won't break. It's not going to cause any serious, like it's not going to break, and it's not going to be brittle, so it's not going to fall out of there either. So basically, I think this dial cover was just the ticket. Now I got a hold again of dialcovers.com, and that is Mark, I think his name is Mark Palmquist at dialcovers.com. This guy is great. If you just Google dialcovers.com, you'll find it, and I'll put a link on this video, or I'll put at least the address. I don't know how to put a link yet, but I'll try to figure that out. You see that nice convex shape to it? That's real pretty, isn't it? He does a really good job. This is brand new. They're real easy to work with. They do have some give for bending. Believe me, I experienced that last night. And he also sold me one for a Zenith. I think the model, it was one I worked on recently. I think it's an 8S 661. I'm not sure. I have to remember the model number. But anyway, I'm going to install that on the radio, and I'll show you pictures of that in the video series that one belongs with. But this is a shout out to Mark at dialcovers.com. And also, it's a call out to the Radio Days, this dial belt rubber material. This stuff's useful in a lot of ways. It's a gasket material. By the way, they sell me a channel material as well, this stuff here, that I use for gasketing on those rectangular Zenith dial glasses that are on a couple of them that I've worked on recently. So this is real useful stuff I get at Radio Days. They sell this belt material in a kit with some super glue. And then don't forget the Novus plastic polish. All right, guys, I'm going to call the owner of this thing back and say, hey, he now has an intact dial cover. All right, that's all for now.